towns, looking at the art, I saw Siege Engine. Siege Engine.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that something players are going to be able to use against other towns, or is that like NPCs will be attacking the towns that players live in and they'll have to help defend?
Yeah, that example is NPCs attacking a town, and whether we let players, what I'll call, drag those around or deploy them in other places is yet to be determined. But what that is that, as you also know, one of the things I'm big on, starting with really Ultima 5, I began to make sure that the antagonists weren't just sitting around waiting for you in the end game, that they were very active in the world with a purpose and a plan. And in our case, the new evil, the new darkness that is rising, you'll discover that they have a very purposeful method and strategy to what they are trying to accomplish. And that includes going around to very specific towns at very specific times and not only just laying waste to them, they're not just out to kill people, they're actually looking for something. But if the town that your home is in is under siege at one of those times, it means that all those quests or central services are offline, and it means you can't go to your house right now. It's literally replaced with the embattled version, and that means if you wanted to go pick up something out of your treasure chest or your storage locker, too bad. If you wanted to go drop off a treasure and hang it on the wall, too bad. You had to help defend the town or run off the bad guys. After which the town will go back to its original state, and you'll be able to go back to your home.
Now, one of the reasons I was asking is it's been mentioned there'll be PvP of some type in this game. You're looking for ways to deal with griefing and making sure that it has consequences for people's actions. And I didn't know if this new evil is going to show up, are players going to be able to align themselves with it and fight on that side, or is it strictly going to be, these people are going to be rogues that are working outside the accepted system?
Yeah, the precise answer to that is something that we're going to work out with the players once we get this crowdfunding underway. But let me give you where our head is at, and then we're going to refine this with the player community. We said, look, we don't really want to go quite as open as UO was originally, because we think that something that is that Wild West and open, while it's great fun to be a PKer, it was not much fun to be a newbie preyed upon by those PKers. And in fact, it really worked against the long-term success of the community when we were trying to bring new players into the game. So we really just think that's not practical for us to go to that extreme. On the other hand, we don't really care for the 100% opt-in, where you either choose a server that's a PK server or not, or that you set a flag that is persistently on or not, as to whether you're part of the PK area. I'm also not particularly a fan of that there is some maps or some regions which are PK, while others are not. And so this is our straw proposal that you'll be exposing to the player base right here. Our straw proposal is that nominally people are not involved in PK. The way PK comes up is by being enticed into crossing that line to the dark side. And it doesn't mean permanently, and it doesn't mean factionally. What we're thinking is that, let's suppose that during the gameplay you will of course meet not only good guys and bad guys, but everything in between. I'm a big believer in there shades between the extremes.
A real world.
Yes, exactly. And so let's suppose that one of the groups you interact with says, look, by the way, I'll pay you handsomely, but for this task. But the task is to take something that is technically legal contraband from the East Coast to the West Coast. And if you are willing to take on that task, which you can separately decide if that violates or not your ethical parables, but if you decide that you're willing to take that one on, as soon as you are on that mission, we now will express to you that you are now available to be PK'd. And we'll also at the same time, of course, go inform a few people along the way that, hey, by the way, there's somebody that's going to be running contraband from the east to the west. There's a big reward if you manage to track them down. And so while you're now carrying it from east to west, you'll go, well, I don't really want to just go right on the main roads, because there'll be lots of players along there, and they will see that I am flagged for assassination or being stopped. And so maybe instead I ought to go take back roads or through the woods, which will be dangerous on its own because there's potentially monsters and things in the woods, but it might be better than facing the potential player resistance that will come as I cross the map.
I know this is going to be, what I've seen, this is going to be a standalone downloadable client game. I know Portalarium, your company, is mostly done browser-based games at this time. What's some of the big advantages of you switching over to this? Because, I mean, is it just something that's too big for a browser?
Well, so the exploration we've sort of done with our earlier products was associated with what I kind of saw happening in the marketplace, and I'll tell you how I've now internalized that for the new role-playing game. You know, solo player games, starting with pretty early, Ultima 4 or 5 kind of time frame, began to sell to millions, one-digit millions of customers. Games starting with Ultima Online, in spite of the fact that it cost more because you had to pay for the game up front and you had to subscribe, and it's more complicated to play compared to a solo player game, MMOs, the best MMOs, UO, EverQuest, World of Warcraft, sell to tens of millions of players. So the market is considerably bigger if you get it right with an MMO, if you can knock off whoever the previous biggest MMO is. Then if you look at the advent of social gaming and even mobile gaming, we moved from an era of tens of millions to some of the very best games sell to hundreds of millions. And so the thing we were trying to study is how and why is that happening? And my analysis goes something like this. The reason why people were willing to play a more complicated, more expensive UO was because instead of having to play alone, they at least got to run into other people and play with other people. And humans enjoy gaming. Tabletop gaming is played with other people. But what the magic of what social media gaming uncovered was that if you, instead of offering, I'm going to play with the masses of strangers that are out there that happen to be bumping into me in an MMO, if instead I leverage the friends graph to help me reconnect to the people I already know, the people I already go to the movies with, the people I already go to dinner with, let me enrich in my game and my gaming experience by deepening my connection with people I already know. Well, that's, I believe, how you can draw to an even bigger audience. And so what we're doing is we're taking that learning and applying it back into what is really a story-based personal experience game. But the way we're doing the multiplayer is that as long as you're connected online, first of all, it will continually bring down the persistent world evolution. So if anybody builds a cool blacksmith shop that sells great equipment through their vendor and is well decorated and right on the main street, and so it's attractive and a place I would want to buy, I'll see it. So any of us contributing to the persistent world will see those contributions. Secondarily, we're then going to leverage whatever friends graphs we can build for you. So either A, if you tell us in our game who your friends are, we will remember that. If you let us have access to your email or G+, or Facebook, whatever it is, we'll bring in those lists of friends. Once we have those lists of friends, we will then look for opportunities to where if one of your friends is also in the game, we will tell you about it. If one of your friends is on the map, we will let you see them walking across the map. If they go into a gypsy encounter, even if they've been in it for 30 seconds or 30 minutes, when you go in, you will join them in that experience in the state that it is at the time you come in. And you don't need to define a party, you don't need to find a guild or a faction. It just ad hoc happens all the time. Your real friends will be brought into your play space in real time. And we'll also bring in some, if most of your friends are not online at that time, which by the way, statistically, even if you have 100 friends you've identified, rare will it be that they'll be in the same place at the same time with you in this virtual world. And so we will also bring in some strangers, but we'll bring in the strangers that the game thinks are useful for you. We're going to bring in people that you're not going to just see once transiently and probably see gone because you're not going to have any reason to care about them. We're going to try to find people who are either in a similar point in their character evolution, so you might see them multiple times and therefore develop a relationship, or people, like in the case example I gave you of running contraband, will purposely expose people to you who are going to give the opposite quest or something in conflict with the thing we've given you. And so we think that takes the multiplayer, creates a persistent world. You get to see the persistent changes that everyone is contributing to. You get to see all of your friends, and you get to see enough strangers to enrich in the play space. But we don't bog down the technology with the classic client-server model of an MMO.
You mentioned mobile, like tablets. Are you looking on having this cross-platform? Because I know there's some challenges, especially when you get into like Linux desktops because of the different distributions. But Android for your tablets, iOS for your iPads, and your Mac operating system, those are pretty consistent. Are you looking to make this game eventually cross-platform that way? I noticed on your Facebook you mentioned you love the idea of playing on tablets.
Yeah, and so first and foremost, this is a PC game, and we're developing it on the PC, and we're developing it. The target market is the PC. We're also developing in the Unity platform. If you guys are, of course, I'm sure familiar with it. And one of the great advantages of the Unity platform is that it cross-compiles really well. And so even right now today, we regularly cross-compile a Mac version because we have a couple of people who use Macs here in the office. So we'll, every few versions we'll crank them out one. And for us to compile to a Linux version, I'm not sure we actually have any Linux users as their primary operating system here in the office. But it literally is for you. But the point is, it's all we have to do is change one variable, and it immediately cross-compiles to Linux as well. So to make it digitally available on all three of those platforms in particular, or it will be a no-brainer. Now, as a player, the truth is that I play about half my gaming now on tablet. And that's for me because I travel so extensively. I'm on an airplane almost all the time, or at least a lot of the time, and at least once a week or so. And that's what I like to do when I'm in line at the airport and while I'm on the airplane is I like to play. And so I need to play not only on my tablet, I need to play offline on my tablet. And so that is an extra challenge that I've sort of thrown at the team, which is to say, not only do I want to play, but I need to play when I'm not connected. And so I'm highly motivated, just for my own self, to make sure this can compile and get squeezed into some kind of tablet device, whether it's iOS or Android. So I hope to do that. But by the way, we're not going to fail on our primary goal for the PC.
Yeah.
Right.
If it turns out that the tab can't do it, then so be it. But I hope we can.
Yeah, that what you're saying makes sense. Windows is still the biggest market. I mean, even though I'm a fan of Linux operating systems, I still keep Windows installed because that's where all the games are. So,
Right.
I could see that. Another thing that I noticed that for this project, you guys are looking at a Kickstarter campaign. Is there going to be, I know a lot of companies do that, they have some type of reward system in place for investors. And I want to know if you had any information about that you'd be willing to share with us.
Yes, absolutely. So the way we're doing the Kickstarter campaign, and why, by the way, we're doing the Kickstarter campaign, if you contrast today with, for example, the development of Ultima Online. Ultima Online, like other large games, took us 3 to 5 years to develop, tens of millions of dollars, or at least ones of millions of dollars, millions of dollars probably back in those days. And we developed a lot of features. I would say half or 2/3 of the features we developed were good, well-conceived features. But somewhere between a third and a half of the features were either under-conceived radically or horribly over-conceived or wrongly conceived. And a couple case studies are things like much to our surprise, we want to make every object in the world interactive, and one of those interactive objects, just by chance, was a fishing pole. And so we'd made it to where if you click on the fishing pole next to water, you had a 50-50 chance of getting a fish. That was the beginning and end of the simulation. That was all we cared about. It was just to make sure the fishing pole worked. And in theory, we could have used it as a quest somewhere, but we really hadn't, never done it. It was just simple simulation. But because it's an online game, you can track what everybody is interacting with. And fishing, compared to most of the other kind of crafting and other things in the game, was far more popular than pets and farming and cafes and all this other kind of stuff. And we were like, wow, we missed that one. And so we then had to go back after the fact and spend a lot of time catching up with the people who really enjoyed fishing. On the other hand, we had created a virtual ecology. Herbivores would eat grass and carnivores would eat them. And if the carnivores couldn't find herbivores, they'd come into town and eat the villagers who would give a quest to help, save us from the carnivores. And we thought it was brilliant until we launched the game. And as soon as we launched the game, players just wiped out everything so fast there was no way we could spawn them fast enough to keep up with the demands of players to have things to kill, and definitely not fast enough to have a virtual ecology be relevant at all, even noticed at all. And so we ended up ripping out this system we'd probably spent $1 million or so on in the development. Right. And so by going to crowdfunding, it does two things for us. One is it begins to develop our relationship immediately with the players. We can begin to bring them in on PvP and if they want fishing, and these other issues to know what we should develop first and how we should begin to tune these things. And it also specifically means we won't have to take much, if any, money from places like a third-party publisher, a distributor of any kind. Because it's interesting to note that the Ultimas that I'm least happy with are the Ultimas I shipped after becoming part of a bigger company that began to
Right.
then have their own ideas based on their sales department as to what I should do with the game. And universally, I think I would much rather be responsible to the player base for whom I am making the game than some salesperson at some big company who's given us some money and therefore has some weight in their statement about, we want you to go left because we believe it and the buyers at that store believe it and they think they know the players when in fact they don't.
Yep.